Well, I'm from Chicago. My name is Rhonda Sanderson. I was born and raised here, but lived in other places. 38 years ago, I went into PR and helped create the franchise PR program that almost everybody uses today in franchising. One of 4 people that kind of were forced to create it because of a client, and worked there, perfected it, and then moved on and created my own smaller firm. Clearly, the reasons for that were a little bit personal, but I loved my boss. He was a good man, but let's just say he's gone now. God rest his soul. So I think I can say that he wasn't always kosher. Sometimes he'd say to me, pay this bill and charge them for this. And things like that bothered me, not because I'm a saint, but because I always felt like it was going to come back and bite me on the ass one day, or him too. So I became pregnant with my daughter. I had lost a child prior to that. One of the reasons that I had come back to Chicago from where I lived with my first husband. And that's how I got into PR. And that's who I am. I love the people in franchising for the most part. I would say 88% of them. I just really could never let go of the few clients that I had from like day one. They've been with me, I would say 30 years or more. So the few that I have left are just the cream of the crop, the plums. And happily, I'm in the position where I can stay in the business I love, but not have that crazy, rush and stress that you have when you have, 20 to 30 employees and 60 to 70 clients. Those were hard days, but they were great days. I mean, they were very exciting. Did a lot of, I feel, important things. It's not curing cancer or fixing COVID vaccines, but we changed some lives. We changed a lot of people's lives, not just the franchisor, like say if 2 men in a truck I had when they had like 1 truck, but all the franchisees that came along, for the most part, with a few exceptions, they're still around today in thriving businesses, or they wouldn't be there, changed their lives, working hard, have families, have a great network. One thing I like about franchising is you just have this fabulous network. If you go to one of the conventions, one that's run well and a company that's doing well and treats their Z's well, you will find such a happy environment. Everybody's networking, everybody's at round tables that share ideas. The guy across from you cannot be your competitor because he's in a different market, but he is going through very similar things that you are. And that's why that works, I think. That's why franchising really works. It's been a journey. It's been, I hate to overuse those expressions, but it has been a journey. My struggles, there were many, not the least of which was starting with a child that died under very questionable circumstances, and left me traumatized. And I had to move on with life. I was 31 years old. You couldn't just curl up in a ball, although I tried to. I would say I give a lot of credit to my younger sister who moved back in. I moved back with my parents, lived on a beautiful ranch in Toronto. I was married to one of the highest paid athletes in the world when this happened at that time. And we had a big ranch, and everything changed. Everything stopped. So I moved. I had there's 10 top things you're not supposed to ever do at once. And they're so formidable and so traumatizing or stressful that you're not supposed to do more than one at a time. And I was doing 4 or 5 of them at one time. The first is the death of a child. The second is divorce. The third is moving from country to country. 4th is finding a job. I mean, they were big things. And I literally found myself in a position where I was having 5 of those events at once. So I did get through that. And I think, some of it makes me think that I got the grit to survive from that. And as I said, my younger sister came home from college and moved back into my parents' house where I had gone back to just to recover. I mean, I was traumatized. I was on antipsychotic drugs. I almost died during the birth. And she kind of brought me back to life. She did Jane Fonda workout tapes with me. She wanted to get my mind off of the really horrible tragedy that happened, and just got my mind back on saving me and getting me back in shape, and just whatever would, take my mind off this horrible event. And I have to say that, they say whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger and all those sayings. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but in a way I do, in the sense that maybe not kill you, but there are things that can change you for life, and they can be very negative, and you don't ever come out of it. So I don't think that whatever kills you makes you stronger. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think there's people that have been through such things in life that they've just never come back as the people that they should be. So I do feel that, there's more than one way that can go. And I was terribly, terribly, I wouldn't say unstable, but I was very vulnerable, because the worst thing that can happen to you, which I think in a woman's case is losing a child, I went, oh my God, the worst thing that can ever happen to me has happened. And now anything can happen to me. And so what you learn is, if you think you led a charmed life and you didn't really have a struggle, I always say the kids in this country are from the land of plenty, and no matter how hard they've worked, or even if they're in poverty, there's nothing like being in a war-torn country or having to crawl out of a pit to survive. And so the same way I felt that I had led a really charmed life in a way, it wasn't anything amazing, but I certainly never had any kind of a trauma like that. And it does change you, whether it's for the good or bad. That's, I think, up to the person. I'm 88% Jewish. I did the ancestry.com, and my mother was completely Irish Catholic. So, or not completely, as it turned out, her father had Jew in him somewhere. So my point of my story is, we have several people on that side of the family that have been through the Holocaust, or their family members had. Mm-hmm. So one of my cousins out of that side of the family always used to say to me, people got through the Holocaust and we'll get through this. And once she said that, no matter what you were saying, you just went, I mean, really, what could your argument be? Listen, there's always something worse, but we have to take care of ourselves. Okay. Something that I learned, I do understand. That's what I said about the kids here being so, they really haven't had to struggle with a war or, ridiculous things. And they didn't look out their living room window and see a bomb explode, or their neighbor's house, all the stuff. But there's always something like that going on. And I always used to say to my ex-husband, my first husband, if you would just worry about your little world, me, our coming child, which at that time was happening, and getting yourself back with your career, because he was a hockey player. And I said, if you just worry about that and stop worrying about all these other, bigger things, if everyone just took care of themselves and their family, theoretically, everything would be going right. So, I also have that school of thought. I do feel bad, as my daughter says, but her knee hurts. I said, I had an operation on my knee. She goes, I don't care what you had. My knee hurts today. And so, it's true. We all have to deal with our own. Well, as you've heard in my other podcast, I do use in my PR world, I do use turning tragedy into triumph often, which sounds so corny. But the truth is, you can, and this is going to sound cliche, I lived for a period when I moved back, before my sister really started lassoing me out of it. Like, get in here, we're going to do this tape that Jane Fonda, that bitch, just made. There was a period where I really did want to die, I'm not going to lie. I would just curl up in a ball. I don't know what they call it nowadays, but I was in a fetal position. My mother wasn't strong enough to come in and go, get out of that bed. She just didn't know what to do to comfort me. And my father was the kind of person where he didn't want to face, I wouldn't know how to handle it. So he just didn't talk to me at all. But what I did learn was, you can't live in between. There's an in-between world. And the depression, which, by the way, some was clinical, as I found out later. I mean, that's legit. That's just like not having enough serotonin in your system, or insulin. So that's a whole nother topic, but it it turned out from this event, I did see a real specialist, one of the best in the world. And it turned out I did have genetic clinical depression. Then it becomes triggered by a huge life event. Well, this was the biggest. But what I learned was, I don't want to live in between, you know, that expression, get on with living or get on with dying. I thought, I'm not going to live 3 years just sitting around pouting or wanting to kill myself or, you know, whatever. And it's something you have to make a choice about, I think. And I'm no expert, but for me, I literally had to talk myself into not forgetting about it. It's 38 years, he would be 38 years old today. So, I mean, I didn't forget about it, but you have to make it work for you or you can't go on. I feel like if you don't make terrible things work for you, you absolutely will not be able to go on. It's a justification, if you will. You know, you say, this had to happen. I used to tell my daughter, he had to die so you could be here. You're from a different, you know, I moved on in life. I divorced that man and married your father. So she goes, oh, that's a lot of pressure on me. Do I have to cure cancer or something? And I said, you just have to be the best human being you can be because you're here for a reason. You know, I also think that's true of anybody that's going through anything. I now allow myself 2 or 3 days to be down about anything. I mean, obviously, I lost both parents. I lost my sister. You know, at 6, she was 60 and I had to pull the plug. I mean, I had the living will for her and every member of my family. Those things are life events you're going to have to go through, but I was able to get through them. Probably a little more, shall we say, or less emotionally, or got a grip on it because I had already gone through what I consider the worst thing anybody could go through. I consider. Some people say, oh no, there's much worse you can go through. But for me, like I said, you have to focus on yourself because you're not dealing with anybody but yourself. So what I learned from it is that you have to make a choice. Are you going to live and feel sorry for yourself for the rest of your life? And by the way, I know a couple of people have done this in their life, not with my situation, but whatever things they've been through, they're just always in that realm. They're always, you know, if only this guy hadn't done this to me, if only my parents, you know, had done something different, you know, if only my parents had, why did they finish paying for my college or whatever? They fall back on it as an excuse. And I'm not saying those things don't exist. There's plenty of people I can blame for things. And by the way, I mean, I give credit where credit is due, but once it's done, there's nothing you can do about that except make a choice to not harm yourself anymore and move on. That's the gift I got out of it. Get off your butt, quit whining about it mentally, quit the self-pity. I will say it made me an activist. The doctor involved was guilty of really killing the child. It was a huge, super controversial case there. And it was in Canada, and you can't sue, there's no malpractice. So he was prosecuted by the Crown, and I had to drive there. I was in Chicago in my job with the PR firm, driving to Toronto every couple months to appear before in the courtroom. And I just learned a lot. I learned, geez, you know, nothing is easy. It was horrifying to have to keep confronting it, but I thought, if this man, who it turned out later when it was in the newspaper, the Toronto Star, that was my first booking. I called the Toronto Star, and I wanted to tell the story so that, you know, he was a horrible doctor, and he wasn't my doctor. He was the guy on call, socialized medicine. And so many women, or maybe 11 women or something, called the paper and said, I had Dr. Hannawell and he did that to me. Something similar happened. So later on, what I realized was it didn't make me feel good that it happened to other people, but it did make me feel good that, you know, I looked under a rock and here comes something crawling out that now he has to at least admit, you know, other people know about it. It's a big story in the paper. And a lot of women did come forward. So I feel like I helped change something. And in doing that, it's not, you know, it wasn't for a conceited reason or this is all about me. It was, I had to say, he didn't, you know, my son's name was Scott Leslie, and I thought Scott didn't die in vain because he stopped this man. maybe it was just my justification, but I do feel that it happened for a reason. I feel like everything happens for a reason. A lot of people agree and a lot of people don't. They go, that's not true. That's, people just tell themselves that. But I do feel that everything's meant to be for one reason or another. So that's my answer to that.
That's kind of where this came from, because there's no gift
No.
in a sick child or the death of a child, but there are things that you learn that I have been able to, I went through this whole period of get a bigger problem. Like, that's what you're complaining about? Get a bigger freaking problem, which is dangerous because you lose empathy for people who are still going through pain. Well, perspective is everything. It really is.
Yes.
So to that point, tell me what the gift in your particular struggle that you just described was. What has it taught you in life? What have you gained from it? Not that it's ever a good thing, but what has been the positive side or the gift?